me would be Robert Burns' poem Halloween, and this was published in the late 18th century, so 1786. He did a collection of poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect, so this is very much within this trend of looking at the past and reinterpreting the past and supposedly kind of trying to rescue memories of old traditions. That's what Juliet was saying before about kind of the way we consider or perceive. Actually recounts the celebration of a Halloween in Scotland, in a cottage of southern Scotland in Ayrshire, on the night of October the 31st. And actually Scott on purpose, sorry, not Scott, Burns, on purpose, uses the Scottish dialect very self-consciously. And he also provides with the poem extensive notes, so he does in a way on the side tries to play the role of the folklorist as well. And he expects his educated readers, because this is addressed to people that, you know, not only can read and write but also have the luxury of buying books like this. He expects them not to be completely familiar with this kind of peasant culture. So you have again this dichotomy of the peasants and their kind of slightly savage but also very ancient roots to the past, and the more educated people trying to interpret it and to understand it and to record it, which, you know, as we said before, it's a bit of an artificial separation, but it's definitely there. Rites or customs are actually, interestingly I think, associated with marriage and with sex. And this is where this idea of Halloween, where as a space where you kind of let off steam a little bit in a controlled way, comes in quite nicely. So you have pulling kale, pulling cabbage stalks, and apparently according to the shape or taste, you would get a sense of the nature and disposition of the person you would marry. Again, you can see the agricultural connections there. There'd be pulling a stalk of grain, and that would be again a little test, because if the top of the grain is missing, then the girl would not be a virgin on her wedding day. So again, little games like that that might say something about your sexuality. Burning nuts, and then you'd name a nut after, according to Burns anyway, after a potential lover, and the way they burn reveals the course of courtship. Will it go all right? You know, will you stay together, or will it all pop out and jump out of the fire, and then that means that it won't go very well. It'll be all blazing fires. Eating apples in front of a mirror will reveal your future spouse. Probably you'll see an apparition of who you're going to marry. It's mainly women that tend to do those ones. And also dipping your finger while blindfolded in 3 plates. And one plate would contain clean water, one would have dirty water, and one would nothing. And again, that would mean you'd be a virgin at marriage, or not a virgin, or you are married. So you have, yes. So again, this anxiety about getting married, especially for young women. And at the same time, you get to see in this poem young men kind of misbehaving a bit sexually, and you see the battle of the sexes there. So I have 2 examples of 2 stanzas. Obviously, so this is a very long poem, and you know, if I did the whole poem, that's an hour on its own. So I'm just giving you a flavour here. So what's happening here? We have the burning of the nuts and a story of love hurting really here. Jean slips 2 nuts with careful eye. What was she wanna tell? But this is Jock, that's the name of the man she's thinking about. And this is me, she says into herself. I'm translating in English, as you can see. He blazed over her and she over him, as they were never more part. Till fuff, he started up the chimney, and Jean had even a sore heart to see that night. So it all goes well, you know, she names the nut after Jock, they blaze together, so you know there's going to be a blazing kind of romance there, but then it pops out of the fire, so that tells her that it's all going to go wrong. So love hurting in this example ties in quite well with the previous scene of what kind of people get marginalized, and how, you know, Halloween might be a way of stigmatizing possibly, but at the same time bringing people back in to the community. I think it's a beautiful scene, and Halloween, you know, it's something that has been overlooked a bit in this novel, and it, you know, the central scene happens, and I think these dualities of disguising and masking and blackness and whiteness kind of come all very nicely together in this point. Okay, I said then that I will move to Halloween in 2 different genres that you'd think, you know, might not necessarily, well, one might work better than the other. And the first one is looking at Halloween in crime or detective fiction. And there is a classic Agatha Christie novel called Halloween Party, which you might have seen. It was adapted a year ago, 2 years ago, with the ITV Hercule Poirot series. It was published in 1969, so we're still going chronologically in a way, and I think it's it's quite apposite to have a mystery or a kind of horror, some slight horror elements in a Halloween story. So this is from the the main kind of description of the book. We have not only Hercule Poirot here, but we have Ariadne Oliver, who is an interesting character because she seems to be an alter ego of Agatha Christie herself. She's the character who writes crime stories. She has a detective character who is a Finn, in the same way that Agatha Christie has Hercule Poirot, who's a Belgian. There doesn't seem to be any good reason for that, and they both think that it's a bit of a mistake. And Ariadne Oliver is staying with friends to Woodley Common, a small village, and there's a Halloween party for teenagers, for local adolescents, and she's invited as a local celebrity, I suppose, somebody who's staying for that period. And what happens is that we have a young girl who is known as somebody who tells tall tales, kind of lies a lot and kind of makes up stories. And when you have the Halloween games in a Halloween party, so bobbing apples, snapdragon, all sorts of things like, again, divination, girls in front of a mirror trying to see who they will marry, all of that old stuff that we saw in Robert Burns in the beginning. What happens is that the young girl she says, I saw a murder a few years ago. I didn't know it was a murder then because I was too young, but now I realise it was a murder. And everybody says, oh, come on now, come on, she's the kind of character who tells stories like that. But then when later on she's found drowned in the bobbing, in the bucket with the apples for bobbing, then some people start thinking, maybe there was some truth in that. So Hercule Poirot is invited to come and sort things out. Well, I'm not going to tell you what happens or who done it, but again, I think Halloween ties quite well with what happens here. I'll let you go and read this one. But even that beginning, the young girl who dies in the bobbing of the apples, which is such a traditional thing to do at Halloween, Ariadne Oliver going off apples completely. She said, I'll never touch an apple ever in my life. And obviously the horror element of, the death of a young child, etc. Go and read it. It is brilliant, this one. Again, very Agatha Christie in certain things, she has certain views, and if you disagree with them, you get a bit annoyed. But the plot is quite nicely constructed. The second genre is actually Halloween in children's literature. And there's been a lot, especially in the last 30, 40 years, because there is a need to do stuff at school, for example, at Halloween, or have a little book to read around that, story to read at bedtime around that period. It's becoming commercially, there's been a need for that. And the one book I wanted to talk about in particular is Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree of 1972. I've got my copy is, it's a reprint, obviously, it's not the original at all. But it's a very short book, it's a novel, but it's, it's for 10, 11, 12-year-old kids could read it in, a couple of hours, maybe 2 nights, and you're done with it. It's very short. But actually, it's really, really interesting, very well constructed. And the author is Ray Bradbury, who's mostly known for horror, for science fiction. Fahrenheit 9/11 springs to mind. That's the text most people know. I usually teach him as a science fiction author in my modules. But he's also interested in imagery, kind of traditional imagery of horror. So he likes this idea of the circus, and the gothic and the grotesque element in the circus.